The sun had barely risen over the quiet village of Enero when whispers began to stir like the morning mist. A strange sight had appeared at the edge of town. A young man, no older than 25, helping an elderly woman down from a bus. Her silver hair shimmered in the early light, her frail hands clutching his arm with surprising trust. Nobody recognized him, yet there was something about his confident stride, his tailored jacket, and the way his eyes scanned the village that commanded attention. The woman was Mama Igioma, a name long forgotten by most, though once it had carried weight. 40 years ago, she had been the wealthiest widow in Enero, until betrayal, greed, and time had stripped her of everything. Now, she returned a shadow of her former self, carried back by a stranger whose presence would soon turn the whole town upside down. The young man's name was Chaik. He had a quiet fire in his eyes, the kind born of both pain and purpose. He spoke little of himself, only saying he had a debt to repay. When they reached the gate of Mama Igioma's old compound, now covered in weeds and memories, he stopped, staring at the cracked pillars with a look of deep resolve. "Let's start here," he said softly. The villagers watched from afar, curiosity blooming into gossip. Some said he was her long-lost grandson. Others whispered he was a con man after her remaining land. But as days turned into weeks, something remarkable began to unfold. Chaik spent his mornings clearing the compound, repairing the roof, and repainting the faded walls. In the afternoons, he'd sit with Mama Igioma beneath the mango tree, listening to her stories of love, betrayal, and lost fortune. She hadn't spoken like that in years. Her voice grew stronger each day, her laughter returning like a forgotten melody. Soon, word spread of the transformation. Mama Igioma, once frail and reclusive, now walked to the marketplace again, her back straighter, her smile radiant. She began feeding orphans and widows, using money that seemed to appear from nowhere. People began to wonder, who exactly was this Chaik? One day, the village chief summoned him. "Young man," he said, peering at Chaik with suspicion, "you came from nowhere. You fix an old woman's house, you give her money, and yet you claim no family ties. Who sent you?" Chaik bowed respectfully. "No one sent me, chief. I came for truth." The words unsettled the room. The chief leaned back, tapping his staff on the ground. "Truth about what?" Chaik's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "About the woman your people abandoned." That evening, Mama Igioma found him staring at the stars outside her compound. "You shouldn't have spoken like that," she warned softly. "They won't understand you." Chaik smiled faintly. "I don't need them to understand yet." The next morning, a black car rolled into the village, sleek, expensive, and out of place. 3 men stepped out in suits, holding briefcases. The villagers whispered that they must be government officials, or perhaps men from the city's elite circle. But when they approached Mama Igioma's house, they bowed deeply before Chaik. "Sir," one of them said, "the documents are ready. Should we proceed with the handover?" The entire village froze. Mama Igioma looked from the men to Chaik, her voice trembling. "Handover of what, my son?" Chaik turned to her, his expression gentle but solemn. "Of your estate, Mama. Everything that was stolen from you 25 years ago." Tears welled in her eyes as memories of deceit and betrayal came flooding back. Her husband's death, her brothers-in-law forging papers, the night she was cast out with nothing but her dignity. She had given up hope long ago. But this young man, how could he know? "Who are you, Chaik?" she whispered. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and drew out an old, worn photograph. A picture of a woman holding a baby. Her younger self. "I believe," he said softly, "that you once helped my mother when she had no one." Her breath caught. The image blurred before her eyes. "Your mother was Ngozi?" He nodded. "You gave her shelter, food, and money when the world turned its back on her. She told me before she died that one day I must find the woman who saved her and repay the kindness tenfold. That woman was you." Mama Igioma broke down, clutching his hands. The villagers who had once mocked her now watched in silence, some with guilt, others with awe. But the story didn't end there. The men from the city had more news, shocking news. The man who had cheated Mama Igioma out of her fortune, her late husband's brother, was now facing investigation for years of fraud and land theft. And Chaik was not just any young man. He was the CEO of a rising real estate empire in Lagos. known for restoring lost lands to their rightful owners. As the truth spread, the villagers' attitudes shifted overnight. They began coming to her home again, offering apologies, gifts, and praise. But Chike stayed humble, still waking early to tend the garden, still listening to Mama Igioma's stories under the mango tree. One evening, as they watched the sunset bleed gold across the horizon, Mama Igioma turned to him. "You've given me back my life," she said softly. "But there's still something I don't understand. Why me? Out of all the people your mother could have helped." Chike looked at her, a strange sadness in his smile. "Because you taught her something no one else ever did. That kindness is not weakness. And she taught it to me." Before she could reply, the sound of distant engines echoed again. Another convoy arriving, but this time not from the city. It was a group of journalists and strangers with cameras, shouting questions, snapping photos, and crowding her gate. "Is it true," one shouted, "that the billionaire Chike Nwosu has returned to rebuild his late mother's village?" Mama Igioma turned to him, her eyes wide. "You never told me you were." He gently placed a finger on her lips. "Titles don't matter, Mama. What matters is what we do with them." But as the cameras rolled and the crowd thickened, something darker began to stir in the shadows. People who remembered the wealth, the power, and the secrets buried with her past. And that was when the real story began. The night after the journalists arrived, Inero was no longer the quiet village it once had been. The roads buzzed with vehicles, and lights flickered where darkness used to reign. Vendors set up stalls outside Mama Igioma's gate, selling roasted corn and palm wine, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young billionaire whose story had already gone viral. Cameras flashed, voices chattered, and her compound became a magnet for curiosity, greed, and admiration all at once. Inside, Chike sat quietly at the old wooden table, his eyes fixed on the papers spread before him. Legal documents, bank statements, deeds, everything that once belonged to Mama Igioma. But he wasn't smiling. His jaw was tight, his eyes distant, as if he could already sense the storm that was brewing. Mama Igioma entered with a tray of hot tea, her steps slower now but graceful. "You haven't eaten all day," she said softly, setting it beside him. "You need strength to fight what's coming." He looked up, surprised. "You already know?" She gave a faint smile. "When you've lived long enough, my son, you can smell danger before it knocks." He sighed. "They've reopened old court cases. The men who betrayed you, some of them still have influence in the city. They're not happy to see justice return." Mama Igioma sat opposite him, folding her hands. "Then let them come. I ran from them once, but not again. Not while you're here." For a moment, there was silence, only the hum of night insects outside. Then the faint sound of singing drifted from the village square. Women were chanting, celebrating her return and Chike's generosity. But in the shadows near the fence, a pair of eyes watched silently, glinting with malice. That night, as the village slept, someone threw a stone at the window. The glass shattered, startling both of them awake. Chike ran outside, but whoever had done it was gone, leaving only a piece of paper tied to the stone. The message was short and cruel. "Leave before we make you disappear too." He stood in the moonlight, his hand trembling as he read it. Mama Igioma stepped behind him, her heart pounding. "They haven't changed," she whispered. "They'll destroy anything that threatens their lives." Chike folded the paper and tucked it in his pocket. "Let them try," he said, his voice cold. "I'm not the boy they think I am." The next day, he brought men from the city, security guards, lawyers, and architects. Within a week, construction began on the land that had once been hers. They were building a new school, a health center, and homes for widows, the very people who had been forgotten when she lost everything. At first, the villagers rejoiced, but soon, old fears crept back. Rumors spread that the land was cursed, that anyone who tried to rebuild it would suffer the same fate as the family that once ruled it. One evening, while Chike reviewed the plans, an elderly man approached him quietly. It was Elder Obi, one of the oldest in the village, with trembling hands and clouded eyes. "Young man," he began cautiously, "you do good work, but there are things you don't understand. That land, it carries blood." Chike frowned. "Blood?" Elder Obi nodded slowly. "When your grandmother's property was stolen, a ritual was done to keep it buried. They said whoever tried to restore it would bring back the spirits of those who died for it." Chike's rational mind rejected such talk, but the unease in the man's tone left a shadow in his thoughts. That night, the construction site was struck by a sudden fire. Half the wood and materials burned before dawn. The villagers whispered of curses again, and even some of Chaik's men refused to stay. But he didn't back down. He rebuilt what was lost, stronger than before. Days passed. Mama Ijeoma noticed how tired he looked, how the circles deepened under his eyes. "You're fighting too many battles," she told him. "You've given me more than enough. Leave the rest to God." But Chaik shook his head. "You don't understand, Mama. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about everyone they've cheated, everyone who was silenced." One afternoon, as the sun burned high, a convoy of black SUVs pulled into the village again. This time, it wasn't journalists. It was men in dark suits, the same kind who had taken everything from Mama Ijeoma decades ago. At the center of them was Chief Nwafor, the very man who once forged the papers that stole her inheritance. He stepped out of the car with a smirk. Time had aged him, but his arrogance was untouched. "So," he said loudly, drawing attention from the gathering villagers, "this is where the prodigal child hides. You think money makes you untouchable?" Chaik stepped forward calmly. "No, but truth does." Chief Nwafor chuckled darkly. "You don't know the game you're playing, boy. This woman," he pointed at Mama Ijeoma, "has already lost once. She'll lose again." Before Chaik could speak, the old woman stood tall, fire in her eyes. "Not this time, Nwafor. You stole from me when I was weak. But look around you. I am not alone anymore." The villagers murmured. Cameras were already rolling again. Someone had called the press. Chief Nwafor realized too late that the scene was unfolding live on social media. Chaik had planned this. Every word, every accusation, every document had been prepared. As reporters surrounded them, Chaik handed over a sealed folder. "Here are the original deeds, signed and sealed before your forgery. And here," he said, turning to the crowd, "are the accounts proving how much land you've stolen from widows and orphans for decades." The chief's face turned pale as the cameras zoomed in. The villagers gasped, shouting, some even spitting at his feet. His power crumbled right there in the open. But amid the chaos, Chaik noticed something strange. A man lingering by the trees, speaking into a phone, watching him with calculating eyes. When Chaik moved toward him, the man disappeared. That night, his phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "You think this ends with him? You have no idea who you're fighting." He didn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the moon through the branches. The more he uncovered, the more he realized this wasn't just a family feud. It was an entire network of corruption that had fed off the poor for generations. And somehow, it all traced back to a name he hadn't spoken aloud in years. His father's. The revelation struck like lightning. Could it be true? Could his own father, the man his mother rarely spoke of, have been part of the same system that destroyed Mama Ijeoma? He said nothing to her. Not yet. But the doubt burned inside him. In the days that followed, the village was alive with hope again. The school's foundation was rebuilt, children sang during the groundbreaking, and Mama Ijeoma was honored as the mother who returned. Yet Chaik's heart grew heavier each day. The more he dug into the past, the darker the secrets became. Late one evening, he drove to the city, alone. He met with a lawyer who had once worked under Chief Nwafor. The man was nervous, glancing around before speaking. "You don't want to know the full truth, Chaik," he whispered. "Your father was their partner. The lands they took, he helped them sign everything away." Chaik felt the air leave his lungs. He gripped the edge of the table, his voice a low growl. "You're lying." The lawyer shook his head. "He didn't mean for your mother to find out. When she did, she ran. That's why you grew up with nothing." Outside, the city lights blurred as rain began to fall. For the first time, Chaik felt his world tilt. All his life, he had fought to honor his mother's memory, to repay kindness with justice. But now he realized that the blood that ran through his veins was tied to the same evil he'd been trying to destroy. As he drove back toward Enero, thunder cracked across the sky, and the road ahead blurred with storm and sorrow. He didn't know what he'd say to Mama Ijeoma, or how she would look at him when she learned the truth about who he really was. And yet, deep down, he knew one thing with certainty. The real war had only just begun. The storm raged through the night like a living beast, the wind howling against the car windows as Chaik drove back to Enero. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating his face, pale, exhausted, haunted. Every mile closer to the village felt heavier, as if the truth he carried was a burden that could crush him. He had uncovered what he was never meant to know. His father was part of the same syndicate that had destroyed Mama Igioma's life. The revelation had torn something inside him, the foundation of the man he thought he was. When he reached the edge of the village, dawn was breaking. The streets were quiet, damp from the rain. As he approached the compound, he saw Mama Igioma sitting beneath the old mango tree, waiting, as though she had known he would come before the sun. She looked up, her eyes gentle, but there was a knowing sadness in them. "You found it, didn't you?" she asked softly. Chike froze. "Found what?" "The truth," she said, her voice trembling. "The one that's been waiting for you since the day your mother died." He sank to the ground before her, unable to speak. She reached out, her wrinkled hand resting on his shoulder. "You've been fighting ghosts, my son." But some of them were familiar faces. Tears stung his eyes. "He was one of them, Mama. My father. He helped them steal your land, destroy your life. Everything I've built, everything I've fought for, it feels like a lie now." Mama Igioma shook her head slowly. "No, my child. What matters is not where you come from, but what you choose to become. Your father's sins do not define you. Your actions do." He looked up, the weight in his chest softening slightly. "But how do I face them? How do I face myself?" "You already have," she said gently, "by standing on the side of truth." They sat in silence for a long while, the morning breeze whispering through the mango leaves. Then Chike stood, his expression firm once more. "This isn't over, Mama. There's more. Powerful people in the city who built their wealth on what they stole from you and others. They think they can bury the past, but I'll show them the cost of silence." And he did. Within days, Chike returned to Lagos and called for a public press conference. The city buzzed with anticipation. The mysterious young billionaire who had rebuilt a forgotten village was about to reveal something explosive. Cameras flashed as he stepped onto the stage, his suit sharp, his eyes burning with quiet defiance. "Years ago," he began, his voice calm but firm, "a group of men built empires on the suffering of the innocent. They took lands that weren't theirs, silenced the weak, and called it business. But the truth has a way of surviving, even when buried beneath lies." He paused, letting his words sink in. The crowd leaned closer. "Today, I reveal the names of those responsible. And I include one name that hurts me the most, my own father." The room erupted in shock. The confession was raw, almost painful to hear. Yet his voice never wavered. "My mother died running from the darkness my father helped create. But I've made a promise. Her kindness, her courage, will not be forgotten. The land that was stolen will be restored, the people who suffered will be repaid, and the truth will be told, no matter the cost." His words spread across the country like wildfire. News channels ran the story for days. Social media exploded with praise and outrage. Some called him the billionaire of justice. Others called him reckless. But the impact was undeniable. The government opened investigations, long-buried cases resurfaced, and those who thought themselves untouchable began to fall. Back in Enero, the villagers gathered around radios and TV screens, listening in awe. Mama Igioma watched from her small living room, tears streaming down her cheeks as she heard his voice fill the airwaves. "You've done it, my son," she whispered. "You've broken the curse." In the weeks that followed, Enero transformed beyond recognition. The school opened its doors, children laughing where sorrow once lived. The health center began treating the sick for free. Homes rose from ruins, and the people spoke of Chike as if he were a legend, a young man who turned pain into purpose. But Chike never returned to Lagos' glittering parties or corporate towers. He stayed close to the village, often seen helping farmers rebuild their lands or teaching young boys how to read beneath the mango tree. To him, power meant nothing if it didn't lift others. One afternoon, Mama Igioma called him over. Her face looked tired, but her smile was bright. "You've given me everything I lost and more," she said. "But now, I want to give you something." She handed him a small wooden box, carved long ago. Inside was a gold necklace, simple, old-fashioned, with a pendant shaped like a sun. "This was my husband's last gift before he died," she said. "I kept it hidden all these years. Now it belongs to you. You brought back the light I thought I'd lost forever." Chike's hands trembled as he accepted it. "You don't have to." "I want to," she interrupted softly. You've healed more than my home, my son. You've healed my heart. That evening, they sat watching the sunset again, just as they had on his first day in Enero. The sky blazed gold and crimson, painting their faces in light. You know, she said with a quiet laugh, when you first arrived, I thought you were an angel in disguise. Chike chuckled. An angel with dirty shoes? Even angels walk through dust before they find their purpose, she replied. He smiled, gazing at the horizon. Then maybe we both found ours, here. Time passed, and seasons changed. The village flourished under their care, and visitors came from far and wide to see what they called the miracle of Enero. But as peace settled over the land, Chike began to feel the pull of something greater. One morning, he told Mama Igioma he was leaving again, not to escape, but to expand what they had built. He wanted to take their story to other villages, to build more schools, more homes, more hope. She nodded, pride and sadness mingling in her eyes. Promise me you'll return. I will, he said, clasping her hands. This will always be home. The day he left, the entire village gathered to see him off. Children waved, women sang blessings, and old men bowed their heads in respect. Mama Igioma stood at the gate, watching as his car disappeared down the dusty road. For a moment, she felt the same ache she had known years ago, the pain of loss. But this time, it was different. It was the ache of pride. Months later, news reached Enero again. Chike's foundation had spread across Africa, building communities, restoring lands, and empowering those long forgotten. His name had become a symbol of justice and redemption, the young man who turned his family's sins into a beacon of hope. But for all his success, he never let the world forget the woman who started it all. Every speech he gave, every new project he launched, he would say, asterisk, this began with one woman's kindness, a woman who taught my mother to believe in goodness and taught me to believe in change. Asterisk. Years passed, and one quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Mama Igioma sat beneath the mango tree once more. She was older now, her hair as white as cotton, her hands frail but steady. Children played nearby, their laughter filling the air. She looked at the path where Chike had once stood, her eyes glistening with joy. You kept your promise, she whispered. You changed not just my life, but the world. As the breeze stirred the leaves above her, a small golden glint fell from the branches, a piece of the old necklace pendant that Chike had left hanging there the day he departed. She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks, and whispered, he will come back. He always does. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in a city blazing with light, Chike stood on another construction site, wearing the same necklace around his neck. He looked up at the sky, remembering the mango tree, the woman who had become his mother, and the promise that had shaped his destiny. The world knew him as a billionaire, but he knew himself as something far greater, a man reborn from kindness, forged by truth, and destined to carry light where darkness once ruled. And though many would tell his story for generations, only he and Mama Igioma knew its truest meaning, that sometimes one act of love, even between strangers, can change not just one life, but the course of an entire world. The wind carried her laughter across the fields that evening, mingling with the echoes of children's joy and the rustling mango leaves, a living reminder that even the broken can rise again, and that love, no matter how unexpected, has the power to rewrite destiny forever.